I knew something was wrong the moment they showed me the room, though no one had said a word yet. A grown woman doesn't need explanations when the truth sits in front of her like a cold metal chair. You feel it in your bones long before you understand it with your mind. And at 79, my bones have learned to warn me before the words arrive. The room was small enough that I could stretch my arms and nearly touch both walls. No window. A narrow cot pushed against the corner, a shaky nightstand, and a single lamp that flickered when the hallway door closed. And the door, thin as cardboard, stood directly across from the laundry room where the dryer hummed like a trapped animal. "If you still want to stay," Carol said lightly, smoothing her blouse, "it's just temporary, until you're back on your feet." Back on my feet? As though a fractured hip healed faster if you put an old woman next to the detergent bottles. I stood there leaning on my cane, letting the silence settle. Daniel hovered behind her, my son, my only child, pretending to adjust the thermostat, as if that could distract me from the fact that he couldn't look me in the eye. He'd told me just days earlier, "Of course you'll stay with us, Mom. Your family." But family isn't offered windowless storage closets. Family isn't placed by the washer where the heat suffocates at night. I knew better than to complain. I've worked in hospitals more than 40 years. I know when someone does something out of duty and when they do it out of heart. This was duty, thin, fragile, and already cracking. "I'll manage," I said quietly, setting my small overnight bag on the cot. The metal frame groaned under the weight, as if disagreeing. Carol smiled in that quick, polite way she always has. "We'll let you rest. Dinner is at 6. If you're too tired, I can bring you a plate." She paused. "Just maybe keep the door closed? The laundry steam can spread." She didn't need to explain what steam meant. I'd heard her the day before when she thought I was out of earshot. Old people have that smell. It sticks to fabrics. When they left, I exhaled slowly, the way I used to after long night shifts, quietly, so no one thinks you're breaking. The air was stale. There was no ventilation, only the faint scent of bleach from the laundry room and something metallic from the thin bed frame. I sat carefully, feeling the mattress dip unevenly beneath me. And in that moment, I remembered the house I'd left behind 3 weeks ago. The one Daniel said was too big for someone your age. My own sunlit bedroom. The peach curtains I chose with my husband 45 years ago. The garden view. Everything familiar, warm, mine. Now replaced by a cot and a humming dryer. I closed my eyes, feeling the ache rise. Not in my hip, but in that place just under the ribs where disappointment nests. I'd hoped, foolishly, that staying with my son would mean comfort. Conversation. Maybe a shared breakfast in the mornings. Instead, I felt like a guest who had overstayed before she even arrived. The first knock came only 10 minutes later. Quick. Sharp. "Mom?" Daniel's voice. Hesitant. "Just checking. Everything all right in here?" In here. As though I were in quarantine. "It's fine," I answered, looking at the blank wall in front of me. "I'll manage." He lingered in the hallway. I could hear his shoes shift, the way he used to when he wanted to confess to something but didn't dare. At 8 years old, it was about the neighbor's broken window. At 17, a failed exam. Now, at 51, I wondered if the guilt tasted any different. "You know," he said finally, "Carol worked hard to clear this space for you." Clear this space. The words slid into me like thin needles. I forced a smile he couldn't see. "Tell her I appreciate it." Silence. Then retreating footsteps. When the house grew quiet again, I lay back on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. A small crack ran across it, jagged like a lightning bolt. It looked strangely familiar, like the kind of line that appears in a relationship years before anyone admits it's there. I folded my hands over my stomach, listening to the dryer thump on the other side of the wall. It wasn't the room that hurt me. It was the realization that they believed this was enough. By the second morning, it became clear they didn't really know what to do with me. Not in a cruel way. Cruelty requires intention. This was something softer, quieter, more familiar. The sort of discomfort people feel when a mirror is placed too close to their faces. I woke early, as I always do. Years of hospital shifts have trained my body to rise before the sun, even when the room is too dark to tell the difference. I sat up slowly, careful with my hip, and listened to the house waking, the steady rumble of the refrigerator, the whisper of someone's footsteps upstairs, the faint clatter of dishes. When I opened the door, a wave of warm, detergent-laced air rolled over me from the laundry room. Carol was standing at the counter folding towels, a neat stack by her elbow. She didn't turn when she heard me. "Oh, good morning," she said, still arranging the towels. "I wasn't expecting you up so early." I've always been an early riser. I reached for a glass from the cupboard, fighting the urge to steady myself on the counter. Old habits. She gave a tight smile. "Right." I moved toward the kettle. Carol stepped aside, but only just. A polite shift of her body, as though making space cost her something. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, of course," she said. "It's just, Daniel has his meeting, and Mila needs breakfast, and the morning is tight." A pause. "We're not used to an extra person in the kitchen this early." "Extra person?" I nodded, though the words landed like small stones. "I'll make my tea and head back," I said lightly. Her relief was too quick, too bright. "That's perfect, just until everyone settles." Back. To the windowless room with the humming dryer. When I returned to it, tea warming my hands, I noticed something new. A plastic storage bin pushed into the corner. Not mine. Inside, I saw winter coats, a pair of old boots, and what looked like holiday decorations. My room was becoming a storage space again. Later, I heard Daniel heading out. His voice was low, hurried. "Just try to keep things calm today," he said to Carol. "She's still healing." Carol sighed. "I know, but she hovers. It's distracting." "She'll adjust," he muttered. "It's only temporary." Temporary, like a suitcase left by the door. Around noon, I ventured into the living room. Mila was on the couch, long legs tucked beneath her, scrolling on her phone. She looked up when she sensed me. "Oh, hi, Grandma?" A polite tone, practiced. She was 17, a difficult age for softness. "Hello, sweetheart. How's school?" She shrugged. "Fine. Mom said you're resting a lot." "Did she?" I sat carefully on the far end of the couch. The cushion dipped under me, and Mila subtly pulled her feet closer, as though I were occupying too much space. "I rest when I need to," I said, "but I'm not made of glass." Mila smiled, a quick flash. "Mom worries about smells. Like your medicine." She said it's strong. I swallowed slowly. "Ah." "She didn't mean it badly," Mila added, though her eyes said she wasn't entirely sure. I forced a gentle nod. "I understand." But I did understand. Not what she said, but what was underneath it. People often dress their discomfort in concern. It makes it easier to live with. Later that afternoon, I tried to help with dinner. Nothing complicated, just peeling potatoes at the dining table. Carol walked in, froze, then plastered on a smile. Oh, you don't need to do that. I like helping. It's just, the kitchen is small, she said, almost apologetic. And we have our system. Her system. Her kitchen. Her home. And me. A visitor. She took the potatoes gently from my hands, but her gesture said something heavier. You don't belong in this space. I retreated to my little room, closing the thin door behind me. The dryer thumped rhythmically on the other side of the wall. Thump, thump, thump. Almost like a heartbeat. Or a reminder. Dinner was tense. Not overtly. No one shouted. No one snapped. It was the silence that spoke. Daniel discussed work. Carol nodded approvingly. Milla chimed in twice. No one asked how I'd slept. No one mentioned my hip. No one noticed when I winced standing up. And then, like a final note, Mom, Daniel said as he cleared his plate, just so you know, the alarm is sensitive at night. If you need something, just knock on our door first instead of walking around. We don't want the system going off. He meant it kindly, I knew that. But kindness can still bruise. I'll stay in my room, I said. Carol exhaled softly, relieved again. That night, lying on the narrow cot, I listened to the house settling. Pipes murmuring, floorboards sighing, soft laughter drifting from upstairs. And beneath it all, the steady hum of the dryer. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I felt something beginning to shift inside me. Quiet, steady, unmistakable. A woman can tolerate being an inconvenience, but she can't tolerate being invisible. By the third day, the house had already learned to move around me. Not with curiosity, not with warmth. Just that polite sidestep people make when they don't want to brush against something fragile or inconvenient. I heard them whispering before breakfast. I hadn't meant to overhear. I'd only opened my door because the dryer rattled violently enough to shake the nightstand. Just be patient, Daniel murmured. I am patient, Carol whispered back, her voice thin as paper. But she's everywhere. Yesterday she stood in the hallway for 10 minutes, doing nothing, just standing. She's recovering. Give her space. I'm giving her space, Carol hissed, but she keeps drifting into ours. Drifting. A ghost, apparently. I stepped back into my little room before they could see me, the door clicking softly behind me. My hands trembled, but only for a moment. Old age comes with a strange sort of dignity. You learn to let your face remain calm even when your heart does not. Later, when I finally emerged, they were already at the table. 3 plates, not 4. Oh, Carol said when she saw me. I didn't know you'd want to eat now. We assumed you'd still be resting. Resting? As though 79 were synonymous with uselessness. I don't mind fixing something for myself, I said. Carol smiled, a stretch, not a curve. That would be best. The stove is tricky. We'd rather you not strain yourself. But what she really meant was, you're in the way. Please don't cook in my kitchen. So I made a cup of tea. Slowly. Carefully. Precisely the way people do things when they're trying hard not to take up space. Milla breezed in a few minutes later, earbuds dangling around her neck. Grandma, can you… She held out her sweater, a pale beige thing with a loose thread. Can you fix this? Mom said you're good at mending stuff. I took it gently. Of course. And, Mom said you have to do it before tonight. I need it for school. Before tonight. Her mother's instructions, not her own. I ran my fingers along the seam. I'll have it done. Her smile was brief, more like a release of tension than gratitude. In the afternoon, I heard Carol on the phone. her voice low but sharp. No, she's fine, just adjusting. She needs supervision. Well, yes, technically she doesn't, but Daniel insists. Supervision, as though I were a toddler with dangerous curiosity. I busied myself by folding laundry, not because I was asked, but because it gave my hands something to do. When Carol saw me carrying a basket of clean clothes, she blinked in startled annoyance. Oh, you don't need to do that. Really, we have a routine. Routine, another word for please disappear. I don't mind, I said. Yes, but it's just, we prefer things folded a certain way. She took the basket from my arms with careful fingers, as if it contained something breakable. Maybe it did. Maybe it was me. That evening, the smallest thing finally pierced through whatever patience I still held. I'd set my mug on the dining table, a plain porcelain cup, white with a fading blue rim. It was my husband's. I'd brought it with me because some things anchor you when everything else shifts. Carol noticed it while wiping the table. Oh, she said brightly, we should probably keep personal items in your room, just so the space stays uncluttered. Uncluttered. A pretty word for your things don't belong here. She placed the mug in my hands, as though returning something I'd borrowed without permission. Of course, I whispered. After dinner, I stayed in the living room a little longer than usual, watching the evening news. My hip ached, but I didn't want to go back to the humming dark. The couch felt familiar, like a memory of home. 20 minutes passed before Carol appeared in the doorway. Oh, are you not going to your room? Daniel and I were planning to watch a show. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were already nudging me down the hall. I rose slowly. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting, she said instantly. We like to unwind privately. Long day, you know. Yes, long day. I took my mug, my unwelcome mug, and walked down the hallway. When I closed the door behind me, the dryer thumped on the other side like a dull heartbeat. For a few minutes, I sat on the edge of the cot, listening. The murmured TV, Carol's laughter, Daniel's low voice, a family settling into their evening. Without me. But the worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the realization blooming slowly in my chest. They weren't even being cruel. No, they simply didn't see me anymore. And the invisibility, the quiet, polite kind, is far more painful than anger. By the fourth day, the house seemed to shrink a little more around me. Not physically, walls don't move, but in the way people's patience tightens when they think no one is watching. You feel it like a draft across the back of your neck, something shifting, something closing. It started with the closet. I'd noticed the day before that the sliding door in my little room didn't open all the way. I had blamed the frame, the carpentry, my hip, anything but intention. But that morning, when I finally tugged hard enough to pull it open, I saw a half-filled cardboard box wedged inside. Carol's handwriting on the side. Winter scarves, candles, miss. My clothes, neatly hung the first night, had been pushed to the far right, squeezed tightly as if apologizing for existing. I stood there for a moment, the kind of stillness that comes before either laughter or tears. In my case, neither came. Only a slow, steady understanding. They were making space for their things, and unmaking space for me. Around noon, I heard voices in the hallway. Not whispers this time, but that careful, clipped tone adults use when discussing something they don't want the subject to overhear. Daniel, Carol said, we can't keep tiptoeing around her stuff. It's everywhere. The things on the bathroom counter. Her lotion smells so strong. She's recovering, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Just be patient. I am patient, but this isn't her house. She should keep her things in her room, all her things. I stood behind my door, listening, my cane lightly pressed against the floor. Not for balance. Balance wasn't the issue. It was steadiness. Later, Carol walked into my room without knocking. She stopped when she saw me sitting on the cot. Her smile flickered before she forced it back. "Oh, hi. I thought you were in the living room." She cleared her throat. "I'm just organizing some space for you." She moved to the closet, lifted the cardboard box, and placed it firmly on the floor. "We're trying to declutter," she said. "It's healthier. Better energy flow." Better energy flow. Of course. I watched her shift my coat aside, then nudge my shoes closer together, as if their placement disrupted the universe. "Your photo," she added, pulling down the framed picture of my husband from the top shelf, "might be safer out in the hallway. It's less crowded there." Safer. Less crowded. Another way of saying less visible. She didn't ask. She simply walked out and placed the picture on a small console near the front door, between a basket of shoes and a rack of keys. I followed her slowly, my hip protesting each step. "I'd like that photo in my room," I said quietly. Carol froze, startled. "Oh, I just thought, the shelf is too full, and guests will see it in the hallway. It's more decorative." Decorative. My marriage, my life, my partner of 52 years, reduced to decor. "I'll keep it with me," I said, taking the frame gently. Her lips tightened for a half second before her smile returned. "Of course. Whatever you prefer." By late afternoon, the next blow came. I'd left my toothbrush and a small bottle of lavender lotion on the bathroom counter, the lotion I've used for decades. Carol's voice echoed through the hallway. "Daniel, please talk to her. My sinuses can't take that smell. It's like, I don't know, old furniture." Old furniture. How poetic. Daniel dutifully came to my door, tapping lightly. "Mom, can I talk to you for a second?" I opened it, and he stood there, shifting from foot to foot like a boy caught cheating on an exam. "Carol's sensitive to sense. Could you keep your things in your room, just to make it easier for everyone?" Everyone. Meaning Carol. "Of course," I said, because what else was there to say? But later, standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, I noticed something small and devastating. The cup where I'd placed my toothbrush had been replaced by a disposable plastic one, the kind they give in cheap motels, a message wrapped in convenience. That evening, during dinner, something even smaller cut deeper. Carol asked Mila to pass the salad bowl. Mila hesitated, glancing at me first. "Oh, don't hand it across the table, honey," Carol said quickly. "Just walk it around. We don't want anything spilled." Anything spilled, meaning don't risk passing something over the old woman. I kept my face neutral. It's easier than people think. After dinner, I tried to help clear plates. "No, no," Carol said, stepping in front of me, hands raised like I was reaching for a hot stove. "Please sit. You'll tire yourself. We have a system." Their system again. I sat. They cleared. They laughed in low tones. And I, with my hands folded neatly in my lap, watched my own shape shrinking inside their world. That night, back in the humming dark of my little room, I placed my husband's photo on the nightstand. The lamp flickered overhead. I looked at him, the same soft smile he always had when he thought I wasn't looking, and I whispered into the quiet. "They're moving me out 1 inch at a time, aren't they?" The dryer thumped once in reply, almost like agreement. By the fifth day, I had learned something important. When people want something from you, they begin by acting as if they're worried for your well-being. Concern is a soft door, easy to enter through, hard to push closed once it's open. It started in the late morning. Daniel had taken the day off work, though he never explicitly said why. He wandered through the house, restless, pausing at my doorway like he wanted to speak but didn't know how to begin. "Mom," he finally said, leaning into the frame, "mind if I come in?" I gestured to the only chair, a folding one Carol had placed there after taking away my old bedside stool because the legs were uneven. Daniel sat down awkwardly, as though he wasn't sure the chair would hold him. "We should talk about things," he began. Things. Always such a convenient word. "You know you're getting older," he said, clasping his hands between his knees. "And we just want to be sure you're prepared." "Prepared for what?" I asked softly. "For the future. Emergencies. That kind of stuff." There it was. Not directly, not crudely, but unmistakably circling the point like a vulture, waiting for a clean landing. Carol appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face arranged into gentle sympathy. "We just want to help, Margaret," she said. "You've always managed everything alone, but it's time we take care of you. And to do that, we need to be included in certain decisions." She leaned on the word with care, stretching it just enough to sound benign. "What decisions?" I asked. "Oh, nothing urgent," she said quickly. "Just paperwork, insurance, your medical directives. Those things can get complicated at your age." At your age, a phrase that felt like a hand pushing me down a staircase. Daniel nodded. "Exactly. We were thinking, maybe you could add one of us to your insurance policy. You know, just in case. Or," Carol added, "let Daniel be the secondary beneficiary, so if anything happens, God forbid, you're protected, and the policy goes somewhere safe." Somewhere safe. Meaning, them. I breathed slowly, deliberately. The way I used to when a doctor asked me to deliver difficult news to a family. Calm face, steady tone, even if something inside me shifted like a cracking plate. "We just don't want you to worry," Daniel said. "If anything happened to you while you were living alone." Carol stepped closer. "And that house of yours, well, it's too much for you, isn't it? So many stairs. So much maintenance. We could manage everything if we knew the documents were in order." I looked at her, then at my son. "So, you want access to my accounts," I said gently. Not accusing, not sharp. Just naming the unspoken thing sitting between us. Daniel stiffened. "That's not what we said." "It's what you meant." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Carol exhaled, letting her facade slip just a fraction. "Margaret, please don't make this difficult. We're trying to help." I thought about the mug they didn't want in the kitchen. My photo moved to the hallway. My closet turned into storage. My toothbrush placed into a disposable cup. My presence treated like a mild inconvenience that kept growing. Help. Yes, of course. I straightened slightly on the cot, ignoring the pain in my hip. "My finances are already managed." Daniel blinked. "By who?" "By me," I said calmly, "as they always have been." Carol forced a laugh, too bright, too quick. "Oh, Margaret, come on. This isn't the time to be proud. We're family." Family. Another soft word with a sharp edge. She stepped forward again, lowering her voice as if coaxing a confused child. "Just show us the documents. We'll take care of the details so you don't have to." "No," I said. Not defensively, not dramatically, just firmly. A clean, steady sound. They both froze. "Mom," Daniel said quietly, "we're trying to protect you." "I don't need protection," I replied. "I need respect." Carol's cheeks flushed a quick, startled pink. "We are respecting you." I glanced at the cardboard box in my closet, the disposable toothbrush cup, the windowless room they said was if I wanted to stay. "No," I said softly. "You're not." Daniel didn't shout. He never does. But his voice tightened, the way it did when he was a boy caught lying. "If something happens to you, we'll be the ones dealing with it. Shouldn't we be prepared?" "You'll be informed," I said. "But you won't be in control." A long silence fell. Thick, heavy, breathing between us. Finally, Carol spoke. Not with irritation, but something worse. Cold sweetness. "Well," she said, smoothing her blouse, "if you're so certain you don't need our involvement, then please don't expect us to scramble when the time comes." "Carol," Daniel warned quietly. She lifted her chin. "I'm just being honest." She wasn't being honest. She was being transparent. When they left the room, closing the thin door behind them, I felt the dryer start again on the other side of the wall. A low, steady rumble. And in its rhythm, I realized something. They weren't just preparing for my future. They were preparing for my absence. And for the first time, I felt the faintest flicker of something inside me. Not fear, not sorrow. Resolve. By the 6th day, something in the house had shifted. Not loudly, not with slamming doors or sharp words, but in that subtle, heavy way when a family decides you're the problem, yet doesn't want to say it aloud. The air thickens. Smiles tighten. Footsteps grow careful. I felt it the moment I stepped into the kitchen that morning. Carol was by the stove, stirring oatmeal. Daniel sat at the table with his laptop open, typing sharply, every keystroke a small accusation. They both paused when I entered. "Oh," Carol said, too bright. "You're up early again?" "I am," I replied, taking a seat slowly. My hip had stiffened overnight. Daniel closed his laptop halfway, as if my presence disrupted his oxygen supply. "Mom, maybe you should rest a bit more. You've been moving around a lot." "I'm not made of dust," I said gently. That earned me a quick glance, half irritation, half surprise. They weren't used to my voice carrying any weight. That tends to happen when people mistake silence for weakness. Carol placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of Daniel. Nothing in front of me. I waited a moment. Then another. Finally, she turned to me with a small, apologetic gesture. "Oh, did you want some? You want—" "I wasn't sure if you were hungry in the mornings." Hungry. As though I were some stray creature whose feeding schedule was unpredictable. "Yes," I said simply. She served me a smaller portion, half of Daniel's. I didn't comment, but I noticed. We ate in a silence so tight it hummed. Then, halfway through the meal, Carol set her spoon down and sighed dramatically. "Margaret, it's just that things have been a bit tense since our conversation yesterday." "Tense?" I asked softly. "Well, yes." She tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "You seemed defensive about the paperwork and everything." "I was clear," I said. Daniel sighed through his nose. "Mom, we only want to help." "But you're not helping," I replied. "You're pushing." That landed like a dropped plate. A sharp silence followed. Carol stood up and began wiping an already clean counter. "I really wish you wouldn't twist our intentions." Twist. As if truth bends simply because someone in the room prefers a different shape. Later that afternoon, I tried again, foolishly, to bridge the growing distance. I found Julia, my daughter, in the living room when she dropped by to check in. She brought flowers, cheap ones, supermarket daisies still smelling of cellophane. Julia hugged me with one arm, already glancing toward Carol. "Hey, Mom, how's your hip?" "Better," I said. "Stiff, but better." "That's good. Carol says you've been overwhelmed." I blinked once. "Overwhelmed?" "She's worried," Julia murmured, voice lowering into that tender tone people use on children. "She said you've been misinterpreting things." Misinterpreting. Another word for inconvenient truths. "Julia," I said gently, "I'm not confused." She frowned slightly, eyes sliding away. "I didn't say you were confused." But she had. Just not out loud. She sat across from me, hands fiddling with the flowers. "Look, Mom, Carol and Daniel, they're doing their best. They've been so stressed with work and Milla's exams. Maybe you could try to meet them halfway." "Halfway to what?" "To not assuming the worst." "I haven't assumed anything," I said calmly. "I've observed." Julia sighed. "Oh, Mom, you always were so proud." Proud. How easily they use that word when a woman has a backbone. She didn't stay long. She rarely does. Her goodbyes were quick, her smile thin. "Just give them grace, okay?" she said on her way out. Grace. As if I were the one handing out small cruelties wrapped in politeness. That evening, another cut came. Small, but sharp. After dinner, I reached for my knitting bag, planning to join them in the living room. Daniel was flipping through TV channels, Carol scrolling her phone. Milla sprawled on the rug. Carol looked up, startled. "Oh, you're joining us." "If that's all right," I said. "Of course," Daniel said automatically, though his shoulders tightened. I sat quietly in the corner of the couch, knitting steady, breath steady, presence small. But a few minutes later, Carol cleared her throat loudly. "Milla, sweetheart, could you get my blanket from upstairs? It gets chilly at night." Milla rolled her eyes but went. As soon as she was gone, Carol leaned toward me with a soft, rehearsed smile. "Margaret, maybe you should rest now. You've had a long day." "I'm not tired," I said. "Oh, but you look tired." Daniel nodded. "It's been a lot lately." "A lot for whom? For them? For the space I occupied simply by being alive?" I folded my knitting calmly. "I'll go to my room then." Carol exhaled, relieved. "Good. Rest is important at your age." "Everything becomes important at my age," I said quietly. "Mom, don't start," Daniel muttered. "I didn't," I replied. "You did." I walked down the hallway slowly, my hip aching, my cane tapping against the floor. When I closed the thin door behind me, the dryer started again, almost on cue. But I didn't lie down right away. Instead, I stood there in the dim light, one hand on the cold metal bed frame. Something inside me was sharpening. Not resentment, not bitterness. Clarity. Because once you understand that people are not actually misunderstanding you, you understand something far heavier. They simply don't mind hurting you. And once a woman my age sees that truth, she stops waiting for grace and starts preparing for consequences. On the 7th day, the house stopped pretending. It wasn't dramatic. Not a single raised voice, not a slammed door, not even a sharp word. Cruelty in families rarely comes wrapped in fire. It comes quietly, through neglect, impatience, and the subtle demotion of a person into a task. It began with the laundry. I heard Carol outside my door in the mid-morning, speaking to Milla in that too bright tone she uses when she feels justified. "Honey, Could you bring your grandmother's clothes downstairs? She's having trouble keeping up. I can toss hers in with ours, just to make things easier. Make things easier. For whom? The next moment, Milla tapped on my half-open door. Grandma, Mom said you want help with your laundry. I looked at the neat stack of my folded shirts, exactly as I had left them. I didn't ask for help, I said gently. Oh, well, she said you did. Milla shrugged, already gathering the shirts in her arms. I reached for them slowly, trying to spare her embarrassment. Sweetheart, I can manage. Oh. Her cheeks flushed. Okay. She set them down and hurried away, relieved to escape the tension she didn't cause. 5 minutes later, Carol appeared. Her knock was perfunctory, really just a warning before entering. Margaret, you shouldn't make Milla feel awkward. She's only trying to help. I didn't make her feel anything, I said. Carol's eyes narrowed in that small, controlled way she thinks I don't notice. Well, she came downstairs confused and upset. I'm trying to keep things smooth in this house, and you... She stopped herself. You're making it difficult. I said nothing. Silence is sometimes the only way to keep your dignity upright. She sighed loudly. Look, it would be nice if you contributed more around here. I know you're healing, but there's dusting, sweeping, little things. Ah, there it was. The shift from guest to help. What would you like me to do? I asked. Her smile returned, thin, triumphant. Just start with the floors, and maybe the downstairs bathroom. Only if you're up for it. The way one says, only if you don't mind being useful. So I cleaned. Not because she asked. I have been asked to do far harder things in my life, but because I needed to feel my own strength. To remember that my bones still carried me. Even in this narrow room they gave me if I wanted to stay. Later, as I was wiping down the bathroom counter, I heard Milla's voice drifting from the living room. Mom said Grandma doesn't like it here. There was a pause. Daniel replied, That's not what she said. Well, that's what Mom told you. Carol laughed softly. I'm just trying to keep peace in the house. She's sensitive. Everything we do upsets her. Sensitive. Me? The woman who raised 2 children through poverty and grief, sat through 1,000 hospital night shifts, and cared for a dying husband without complaint. Sensitive. When I returned to my room, a new box had appeared on my cot, labeled extra linens. My things, the few I brought, had been moved again, squeezed into an even smaller corner. I stood there, looking at the box, feeling something inside me turn colder and clearer. I wasn't living in a room. I was occupying a space they wanted for storage. Late that evening, as I sat on the narrow cot knitting a row I'd unraveled twice from distraction, I heard laughter from the living room. Carol's bright giggle, Daniel's deeper chuckle, Milla's high, sweet note. Then, quietly, as if by accident, I heard my name. She's temporary. Milla's voice, clear, unfiltered. A pause, my heartbeat in my ears. Carol's reply came, soft and smug. Yes, honey, only until she's back on her feet. Then she'll go home. It's better that way. Better for them. Never once did they ask what was better for me. I set my knitting down, slowly, deliberately. For the first time since I arrived, I felt no ache for their acceptance, no longing for understanding. Something else stepped in, something steadier. Not anger, recognition. People show you who they are when they think you can't hear. Later that night, as I eased myself into bed, I caught my reflection in the small mirror above the nightstand. Lined face, gray hair tucked behind one ear, eyes still sharp enough to catch every detail. "You're not temporary," I whispered to myself. "And you're not helpless." The dryer hummed behind the wall like a low drum. I closed my eyes, letting the sound roll over me. In that dim room they gave me, the smallest one in the house, I realized something profound. They believed they controlled the ending, but they had no idea that endings are never determined by the people who push you out, only by the one who decides to walk away. And I knew I was getting closer to that decision every hour. On the 8th day, someone finally noticed me. Not because I was in the way, not because I'd placed a mug where it didn't belong, not because my lotion smelled old, but because she looked at me. Truly looked. Her name was Lily, Julia's daughter, my other granddaughter. 17 years old, quiet, thoughtful. Not polished like Milla, not sharp-tongued like Carol, not guarded like Daniel. Just present. She'd always had that gift, standing still long enough to see what others miss. She arrived mid-afternoon, unannounced, carrying a tote bag with a stack of books she thought I might like. When Daniel opened the door, I heard the surprise in his voice. "Lily? I didn't know you were coming." "I finished my classes early," she said. "Grandma's here, isn't she? I wanted to see her." A pause. Too long. Then Daniel said, "Of course." But the hesitation, just a breath, told its own story. She came down the hallway, her steps light, and knocked softly on my door. "Grandma, it's me." I opened it, and there she stood. Freckles dusted across her nose, hair in a loose braid, eyes warm in that quiet way some people are born with. I hadn't realized until that moment how starved I'd been for gentleness. "Oh, sweetheart," my voice cracked. "Come in." She hugged me carefully, mindful of my hip. "Mom said you were staying here while you healed. I wanted to check on you." Her gaze drifted around the tiny room, the cot, the boxes of linens, the flickering lamp, the fact that I had no window, no chair except that cold folding one. She didn't say anything cruel. She didn't gasp or frown, but her silence spoke loudly. "Is this comfortable for you?" she finally asked, her voice soft. "It's manageable," I replied. "Manageable isn't comfortable." Smart girl. She sat on the cot beside me, setting down her tote bag. "You look tired." "I'm fine," I said. "You've always said that, Grandma," she murmured, "even when you weren't." I didn't know how to answer that, so I held her hand instead. After a few minutes, she reached out and gently touched a faint bruise on my upper arm, one I'd forgotten was even there. A dark, round mark the size of Daniel's fingertips, from when he'd tried to help steady me 3 days ago and gripped too hard. His intention hadn't been unkind. But intention doesn't erase marks. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No," I lied. "What happened?" "I slipped," I said. She raised one eyebrow, her mother's expression, but softer. "Grandma." I exhaled. "Your uncle grabbed me to catch me. He didn't realize." She let the explanation sit. She didn't accuse, didn't argue. She just held the truth carefully, like a cracked egg. "They're overwhelmed," I said, trying to give my children one last defense. "And you?" she asked. "Are you overwhelmed?" No one had asked me that. Not once. "Yes," I whispered. "But I can manage." There was that word again. Manage. The word women my age use when they aren't allowed to say they're hurting. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. "You shouldn't be in this room." "I'm only here until I'm better." She looked at me with those steady eyes. That's not why you're here. I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because she had told the truth too plainly. And sometimes honesty is harder to swallow than deceit. We sat like that for a long while, in the hum of the dryer and the faint smell of detergent leaking through the wall. Then, softly, Lily said, "You know you don't have to stay where you're not wanted." My throat tightened. "They want me here." "No," she said gently. "They want the version of you that doesn't need anything, the version that doesn't take space or time or money or care. But you, Grandma?" She touched my hand. "They don't see you." I closed my eyes. Because that was the truth I'd been tiptoeing around for days, and hearing it from someone younger, someone untouched by guilt or obligation, cut deeper and cleaner than anything Carol or Daniel could ever say. Finally, I asked her the question. I hadn't let myself think too loudly. "What would you do, Lily?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd leave." "Leave?" The word felt dangerous in my mouth. "Yes, I'd leave before they decided for me. I'd go somewhere safe, somewhere I could breathe." I let the idea sit between us, fragile, trembling, leaving. A word so simple, yet it carried the weight of years, of habits, loyalties, fears. But as she spoke, something inside me loosened, like a knot that had been tied so tightly I'd forgotten how freedom felt. "You deserve more than this," she whispered. She didn't mean a bigger room. She meant dignity. When Lily stood to go, she kissed my cheek and squeezed my hand. "Promise me you'll think about it." "I will," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. After she left, I sat on the cot with the book she brought, untouched, listening to the house breathe around me. Daniel and Carol walked past my door later, whispering. "Did you know she was coming?" Carol asked. "No," Daniel said. "But maybe it's good Lily saw her. Maybe it'll reassure her that Mom's fine." Fine. I looked at the bruise on my arm, at the cardboard boxes, at the tiny room. They cleared for me. I wasn't fine, but I was awake. And that is the beginning of every ending worth choosing. On the 9th day, the house felt smaller than ever, as if the walls had learned from the people living inside them. They pressed in, inch by inch, the way guilt presses on a chest when no one admits the truth out loud. But inside me, something else was expanding. Not anger, not rebellion, memory, old memories, steady ones that reminded me who I had been long before I was offered the smallest room if I wanted to stay. It began with a simple ache in my hip, a deep, familiar pulse that told me rain was coming. I sat on the edge of the cot, massaging the joint with slow, practiced circles, and for the first time since I arrived, I let silence stretch long enough to hear myself think. I remembered being 35, working double shifts in the emergency department, lifting patients twice my size without complaint. I remembered stitching wounds with trembling hands after losing a patient, then wiping my eyes in a storage closet before stepping back into the bright, unforgiving halls. I remembered holding my husband's hand through his final days, calm, steady, present, even when my heart felt like breaking glass. I had been strong then. And strength doesn't evaporate just because the world stops expecting it from you. By mid-morning, Daniel and Carol had left. Milla was at school. The house was silent. Too silent. A hollow, empty quiet, like a jar without air. It felt like the right moment. I went to the closet and pulled down the old leather folder I had packed before the move. I hadn't opened it in 2 years, not since my husband died. It held every important paper in my life: birth certificates, insurance policies, property documents, medical directives. Evidence that I existed long before my children learned to see me as an inconvenience. I set the folder on the cot and opened it carefully, as if it might crumble. Inside, everything was still in its place: my handwriting, my husband's signatures, entire decades of decisions, diligence, responsibility, a life, my life. I felt the weight of those papers, how they grounded me, how they reminded me that I had always managed things without permission or approval. As I flipped through the pages, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Henley?" a man's voice said. Warm, professional. "This is Attorney Stephen Parsons. Returning your call." I exhaled. Slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Parsons. You said it was urgent," he continued. "Are you safe to talk?" Safe. Such a simple word. Such a piercing question. "Yes," I said. "I'm alone right now." "Good." I could hear him shuffling papers. "You mentioned concerns about guardianship pressure, possible financial coercion." There it was, named plainly by someone who didn't soften the truth with politeness. "Yes," I said. "My son and his wife have been asking about my insurance and suggesting they take over my paperwork." "And is that what you want?" "No," I said. My voice was steady. "It isn't." "Then let's take steps to ensure they can't." He explained things slowly, respectfully, never once talking to me as though I were fragile. He suggested updating my medical directive, adjusting my insurance beneficiary, and placing my assets into a revocable trust under my sole control. "We can make it impossible for anyone to pressure you," he said, "if that's what you choose." "It is," I whispered. "Good. I'll prepare everything. We can meet tomorrow morning. Do you need transportation?" I hesitated. My hip ached. The bus was out of the question, and I had no car. "My granddaughter may be available," I said. "Lily, correct?" "Yes." He paused only for a second. "She sounds trustworthy." "She is." We finished the call, and when I set the phone down, my hands trembled. Not from fear, but something closer to relief. A quiet, grounded feeling I hadn't felt since before Daniel offered me this room. A feeling of taking ownership of my fate. Around noon, I made myself a cup of tea. As I reached for my mug, I heard the front door open. Carol's footsteps. Light. Purposeful. She walked into the kitchen just as I stirred my tea. "Oh, Margaret," she said, startled. "You're out of your room." "Yes," I said calmly. She blinked. "Right. Well, I just thought you'd be resting." "I've done enough resting." Her smile twitched. "If you say so." She opened a cabinet, then stopped, noticing the leather folder on the table. "What's that?" "My papers," I said. Her eyes flickered, just a small, sharp movement. "Why?" "I was organizing them." "Oh." Her voice changed, too casual. "If you want, Daniel and I can look through them tonight." "Just to make sure everything's updated." "I've already arranged that," I said quietly. "With who?" she asked, too quickly. "My attorney." The pause between us was long enough to count heartbeats. Carol exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. "Margaret, you don't need an attorney. We're your family." "I know," I said. "That's why I need one." Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, with anger she didn't want to show. "Daniel won't like this," she said. "I'm not asking for his approval." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her shoulders pulled tight, as if she were containing something that wanted to claw its way out. Finally, she said, "Well, do whatever you think is necessary." "I will." When she left the kitchen, the silence returned, but it felt different now. Not hollow, not suffocating, open. I went back to my room with the folder in my hands. The dryer hummed behind the wall, but the sound didn't grate anymore. Maybe because I knew it wasn't permanent? Maybe because I knew the room wasn't the end of the story. For the first time since I arrived, I felt like someone I recognized. Not a burden, not an inconvenience, not a temporary guest. A woman with a spine. A woman with a plan. And once a woman my age makes a decision, there isn't a force on earth that can stop her from seeing it through. On the 10th day, the house woke before I did. I heard it in the tightness of footsteps, the clipped tones in the hallway, the way Daniel cleared his throat as though preparing himself for something unpleasant. Maybe Carol had told him. Maybe she hadn't. But the air had changed, carrying that quiet storm smell, tension before truth. I rose slowly, easing weight onto my hip, then gathered my papers into the leather folder. We had an appointment with Attorney Parsons at 10. Lily had agreed instantly when I texted her the night before. "Of course I'll take you, Grandma. I'll be there." If there is one mercy in a lifetime of motherhood, it's that sometimes grandchildren arrive like small, unexpected lanterns in the dark. When I opened my door, Daniel was standing in the hallway. He hadn't knocked. He was waiting. "Morning," he said stiffly. "Good morning," I replied. His gaze dropped to the leather folder in my hand. "What's that?" "My documents." "For what?" "For an appointment." His mouth tightened. "With who?" "Carol said something yesterday about a lawyer. Is that true?" "Yes." "Mom." He rubbed his forehead as though I were a complex equation he'd failed to solve. "Why would you go behind our backs like that?" "Behind your backs?" I repeated softly. "I didn't realize I needed permission." "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." His jaw clicked, a small sound but telling. "We're trying to help you, and you're making everything harder." "By managing my own life?" I asked. "By doing what I've done for nearly 80 years?" He didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow breath, then said, "Mom, if this is about the insurance conversation, Carol feels terrible. She was only thinking about your safety. We both were." "I know," I said. "I'm thinking about my safety, too." He looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe for the first time since I moved in. And whatever he saw, he didn't like. "I just don't want things to get complicated," he murmured. "They're already complicated," I said gently. "You just haven't acknowledged it." Before he could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Light, quick, familiar. Daniel opened it, and Lily stepped inside with her tote bag and a shy smile. "Hi, Uncle Daniel." He blinked in confusion. "Lily, what are you doing here?" "I'm taking Grandma to her appointment." Her tone was polite, calm. But the precision of her answer left no room for debate. Daniel turned to me, eyes wide with a kind of betrayal I didn't deserve. "You told her? Instead of us?" "I told the person who asked how I was," I said. "You didn't." That landed, deep. But before he could gather himself, Carol appeared at the top of the stairs. "Oh, Lily, I didn't know you were coming." "I texted Milla," Lily said. Milla, behind Carol, peeked over the railing. She didn't say hello. Carol descended, slow and cautious, like someone approaching a wild animal she hoped was still tame. "Margaret," she said, her smile too soft. We should talk before you go. No, I said. We shouldn't. The smile froze. I stepped toward the door. Lily took my folder gently, carrying it as if it mattered. Daniel tried one last time. Mom, please, don't sign anything today. Let's just discuss it first. As a family. I looked at him, not with anger, not with spite, with truth. We've had 9 days to discuss things as a family, I said. You discussed everything except me. His face fell, not dramatically, just enough. Lily touched my elbow. You ready, Grandma? Yes, I said. But as I reached the doorway, Carol spoke again, this time with that sharp, thin panic people feel when control slips through their fingers. If you do something drastic, Margaret, she said, you'll regret it. I turned back to her. No, I said. I regret staying quiet. The room went completely still. Then I stepped outside into the morning light. Bright, clean, honest. Nothing like the dim hallway behind me. Lily walked beside me down the driveway. You did well in there, she whispered. I didn't do anything, I said. You did, she replied. You told the truth out loud. We reached her car, and she opened the passenger door for me, the way she'd probably seen her mother do for patients at the clinic. Once I settled in, she buckled my seatbelt gently, careful of my hip, and closed the door. As she rounded the hood to take her seat, I looked back at the house. Not with sadness, not with longing, with clarity. A house only becomes a home when the people inside treat you like you belong. That place had stopped being my home a long time ago. When Lily started the engine, she glanced over at me. You okay? Yes, I said, feeling it settle inside me. For the first time since I arrived, I was going somewhere by choice. And the thing about choice? It's the beginning of freedom. On the 11th day, I learned just how quickly panic can turn into anger when people lose access to something they believed they owned. Not love, not affection, control. Lily drove us to Attorney Parsons' office, a modest brick building with ivy growing along the side. No marble pillars, no grand entrance, just a clean doorway and a receptionist who greeted us both by name. Respect is quiet like that. Mrs. Henley, she said, Mr. Parsons is ready for you. Lily helped me up the small ramp. I'll wait in the lobby, she whispered. No, I said, come in. She blinked, surprised. Are you sure? You came here for me, I said. Stay. Inside, Mr. Parsons stood to greet us, a tall man with kind eyes and the sort of steady voice people trust during the worst days of their lives. He shook my hand carefully, as though aware that dignity is something you can bruise. Please, he said, guiding us to his office. Let's go through everything step by step. We sat at a round wooden table, not a desk, not something looming over us. A table, as equals. He opened a folder already prepared in my name. I reviewed your documents, he said. Your children currently have no legal claim to your assets, but they could exert pressure through informal means. Our goal is to prevent that. He slid the trust papers toward me. This, he said, gives you full control of your estate. No one can access anything without your explicit consent. No one can move you to a nursing home. No one can make medical decisions for you. I breathed in slowly. Relief has its own flavor, like steam rising from a cup of tea after weeks of cold water. And your granddaughter Lily, he added, can be listed as secondary trustee, only if you choose. I looked at Lily. Her eyes widened, then softened. Grandma, you don't have to. I know, I said. That's why I want to. We went through everything, My house, my accounts, my insurance, my medical directive. Every decision was mine alone. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been quietly taken. When I finished signing, Mr. Parsons gathered the documents. "You're protected now," he said. "Truly." I nodded. "Thank you." Lily squeezed my hand under the table. No words, just warmth. But as we walked out of the office, my phone began to ring. Daniel. Then again. Then again. We had barely reached the car when another call came, this time from Carol. "Grandma," Lily said softly, "you don't have to answer." "I know," I said. But I did, because avoiding them wouldn't change the inevitable. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Mom?" Daniel's voice was sharp, breathless. "Where are you? Carol said you left with Lily. Why didn't you tell us?" "I had an appointment," I said calmly. "A legal appointment?" His voice tightened. "Mom, what did you sign?" "That's not your concern." "It is my concern," he snapped. "You're making decisions without us. Big decisions. You're not thinking clearly." Ah, there it was, the oldest card in the deck. "I'm thinking very clearly," I said. "You're being manipulated," he said. "By that lawyer, by Lily. Mom, you don't understand how—" I cut him off. "Daniel, stop." Silence, heavy, stunned. "I have managed my life for nearly 8 decades, I said. "I do not require permission to continue doing so." "Mom?" "No, just that. A clean, simple boundary." "You went behind our backs," he whispered, voice breaking in a way that might have moved me if I didn't know what he really meant. "You slipped out of our control." "I did what I needed to do," I said. Then I ended the call. 5 minutes later, Carol texted something long, nearly a paragraph. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. People rarely say anything new when they're angry about losing access to something that was never theirs. When we got back to the house, I could feel the tension through the front door like heat from an oven. Daniel stood in the living room waiting, face red, eyes dark. Not with sadness, but with a kind of righteousness that people use when they're offended on behalf of their pride. "Mom?" he said as I stepped inside. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. "You need to listen." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Not to silence him, just to hold the space. "I'm still your mother," I said, "but that does not give you ownership of my life." Carol appeared behind him, arms crossed. "We were trying to protect you." "No," I said. "You were trying to manage me." Daniel flinched. Carol's voice thinned. "You're making us sound like villains." "There are no villains here," I said softly. "Only people who forgot I am still a person." The silence that followed was long, brittle. Finally, Daniel spoke, quietly this time. "So what happens now?" I looked at him. "Now," I said, "I decide what comes next." His shoulders sagged. He understood more than he wanted to. That night, in the tiny room beside the humming dryer, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. But for the first time since arriving, the crack didn't look like a fracture. It looked like a door. And once you see a door, you can't pretend the wall is solid anymore. On the 12th day, the house finally said out loud what it had been whispering for more than a week. Not with words at first, words came later, but through the way people moved around me, as if I were a spill on the floor, something to avoid stepping in. By morning, Daniel's smile was gone entirely. Carol's, too. They weren't pretending anymore. Pretending takes effort, and anger is easier. I walked into the kitchen to make tea. Carol was at the sink, scrubbing a frying pan as though she meant to erase the metal beneath it. She didn't look at me when she said, "We need to clear the air." "All right," I said. She turned, crossing her arms tightly. "I don't appreciate being made into the bad guy." "I didn't make you anything," I replied. "I simply took care of my affairs." "You blindsided us," she said, her voice fraying at the edges. "You made serious changes without involving the family." "My affairs," I repeated gently, "belong to me." Daniel entered then, jaw clenched, shoulders tense. He wasn't a cruel man, just a man who had grown used to the idea that his mother's life was an extension of his. Many men do, without meaning harm. Harm doesn't require meaning. "I want to understand," Daniel said, "why you didn't trust us." I looked at him carefully. "Trust is not obedience." His eyes flickered. "I trusted you," I said. "I just didn't hand over my autonomy." "That's not fair," he muttered. "What's not fair," I answered, "is asking an old woman to give up her independence so her children can breathe easier." Another silence, thick, brittle. Then Carol said something I will remember for the rest of my life, not because it was cruel, but because it revealed the truth she'd been hiding even from herself. "You're making this house unstable, Margaret." There it was. Not my hip, not my needs, not the tiny room or the toothbrush in a plastic cup. Me, a destabilizing presence. I nodded slowly. "I see." She continued, her voice rising as though she'd finally been granted permission to speak plainly. "We have routines. We have structure. And since you came here, everything has been chaotic. You question everything we do. You make Mila uncomfortable. You judge us. You don't fit." Fit. Another small, sharp word. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Carol." "No," she insisted. "She needs to hear it. We opened our home to her during a difficult time." And instead of gratitude, she brings drama. Drama. A woman defending herself is always dramatic in the eyes of someone who prefers her silent. I placed my hands on the back of the kitchen chair to steady myself, not my body, but my heart. "I didn't bring drama," I said quietly. "I brought boundaries." Carol scoffed. "Boundaries?" She laughed once, a brittle sound. "You're living in our home. You don't get boundaries." And there it was, naked, raw, true. Daniel murmured, "Carol, please." "No," she repeated. "I'm done tiptoeing. We have our own lives. We have responsibilities. We can't babysit an elderly woman who refuses to cooperate. If she wants independence so badly, maybe she should—" "Carol," Daniel snapped, "stop." But she didn't. She had found momentum. Maybe she should go back to her own place if she can manage so well. I stood still, completely still. Then I said, "You're right." They both stopped. "I should go," I said softly. Their faces froze, Carol triumphant, Daniel horrified. "No, Mom, that's not what she meant." "It's exactly what she meant," I said. "And she is right." Carol blinked, taken aback by how easily the victory came. "You don't belong in a place where you're seen as a burden," I added. "Especially when all you needed was kindness." Daniel stepped forward, voice cracking. "Mom, please, don't leave like this. We're just frustrated. Let's talk again tonight." "There is nothing to talk about," I said. "You made yourselves clear." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Where would you even go?" I didn't answer. He mistook that silence for uncertainty. "You can't stay alone," he insisted. "You need help. You need us." But I'd already arranged my help, already reclaimed my life, already planned my exit. The moment Lily drove me to the lawyer's office, the direction of my life shifted by degrees. And once a shift begins, it cannot be undone by fear or guilt. "I will be leaving," I said. "Not today, but soon, and safely." Daniel looked at me the way someone looks at a door they thought was locked, suddenly realizing it wasn't. "Mom," he whispered. But I shook my head. "I gave this place every chance," I said. "Every chance for respect, for warmth, for compassion." I turned to Carol. She didn't flinch. "And you gave me a small room and smaller expectations." Her lips parted, then sealed. No apology came. I nodded once. "Thank you for the clarity." Then I walked away, down the hallway toward the smallest room in the house, Kane tapping softly on the floor. The sound rang louder than their silence. When I closed the door behind me, the dryer on the other side of the wall hummed as always. A familiar sound. But it didn't bother me anymore. Nothing that is temporary can wound you once you decide to leave it behind. I sat on the edge of the cot and folded my hands in my lap. Tomorrow, I would put the rest of my plan into motion. Tonight, I allowed myself only one thought. I was finally done asking for a place where I was never welcomed to stay. On the 13th day, I woke before the house. Not because of pain, though the hip protested as always, but because something inside me had gone quiet. Not numb, not cold, just settled. Peaceful in the way a final decision feels. I sat up slowly, letting the thin blanket fall to my lap, and looked around the room that had been both a shelter and an indictment. The smallest room, the humming dryer, the closet half filled with things that weren't mine. This room had shown me the truth, inch by inch. And today, I would leave it behind. I dressed in my soft gray slacks, the ones that didn't tug at my hip, and a pale blue cardigan my husband once said made me look fresh as spring. Nearly 40 years later, it still brought me comfort. I brushed my hair, fastened my simple pearl earrings, and placed his photo gently into my tote bag. I would take him with me. He would have wanted that. At 7:30, I stepped into the hallway. The house was still. No footsteps, no voices. The kind of silence that makes people believe everything is fine. I walked to the kitchen, Kane tapping softly, and took one last look at the space I had tried so hard to fit into. The neat counters, the high-end appliances, the faint scent of Carol's lemon cleaner. Everything in its proper place, except me. I made myself a cup of tea the way I always did, and sat at the small breakfast table. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't rushing. Leaving with dignity means leaving on your own terms. At 8 o'clock sharp, a gentle knock sounded at the front door. I knew that knock. Lily. I stood, smoothing my cardigan, and opened the door. She smiled, warm, relieved, steady. "Ready, Grandma?" "Yes," I said. "I am." She took my tote bag from me, holding it with both hands, as though she understood the weight inside wasn't physical. We made it halfway down the walkway before Daniel stepped outside. "Mom?" His voice carried confusion, sleep, and something heavier. "Where are you going?" I turned. He wasn't dressed yet, still in a t-shirt, hair uncombed. He looked younger like that, younger and more lost. "I'm leaving," I said softly. His face broke open. "Just like that?" "Not just like that," I replied. "I've thought about this for days." Carol appeared behind him in her robe. She took one look at Lily, then at my tote bag, and her expression shuddered, cold and sharp. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Margaret, stop making a scene." I stood straighter. If I wanted a scene, I wouldn't be walking quietly out the door. Daniel stepped forward, barefoot on the porch. "Mom, you can't just go. Where will you even stay?" "Somewhere I chose," I said. Not somewhere I was placed. He swallowed, throat working. We were trying to help you. I know, I said, but your help hurt. His eyes dropped to the ground. Carol folded her arms. You're leaving because of one argument? One? I asked. Carol, it's been days. She opened her mouth, ready to deny, but I didn't need her admission. Lily's car waited at the curb, engine quietly running. I'll come back for the rest of my things later, I said. Or Lily will. Daniel looked up then, voice hoarse. Are you angry? No, I said. And it was true. I'm simply done trying to stay where I'm not welcomed. Carol scoffed. No one said you weren't welcome. You didn't have to, I replied. Lily touched my elbow. Time to go. I turned toward the car, but something made me look back once more. Not regret, just closure. Daniel, I said softly, I love you. That hasn't changed. But love isn't the same as letting people shrink you. He nodded once, eyes shining but unshed. Carol said nothing. I walked with Lily to the curb, every step steady. When she opened the passenger door, I eased myself inside, feeling a strange mixture of sadness, relief, and something I hadn't felt in years. Self-respect. As we drove away, Daniel remained on the porch a long time, growing smaller in the rearview mirror. 10 minutes later, Lily turned to me. Where to, Grandma? The Evergreen House, I said. She smiled. The place you told me about? With the garden and the big windows? Yes, I said. That one. We pulled into the driveway of the residence 20 minutes later. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a warehouse for the dying, like the places families send their guilt to live. It was warm, bright, quiet, respectful. A nurse came out to meet us, a woman about 40, with gentle eyes and a firm handshake. Mrs. Henley, we've been expecting you. Your room is ready. My room. Not the smallest one. Not a storage space. Not an afterthought. A room with a window overlooking a small garden where someone had planted roses. A room with sunlight on the floor. A real bed, wide, soft, inviting. A wardrobe with space for my clothes, not cardboard boxes. I sat on the bed, letting the softness settle around my sore hip. Lily unpacked my tote bag, placing my husband's photo on the dresser. You'll like it here, she whispered. I already do, I said. I looked out the window at the blooming roses, each one bright as a promise. I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel defeated. I felt free. And once a woman my age recovers her freedom, even in small doses, she never lets anyone take it back again. On the 14th day, I woke to sunlight. Real sunlight. Warming my face through a broad window that overlooked a small courtyard garden. Birds were picking at crumbs near a stone bench, their little feet tapping in quick, bright rhythms. The world felt gentle, unhurried, as if someone had finally turned the volume down on life. I lay there for a moment, listening to the soft hum of morning activity beyond my door. A cart rolling down the hallway, a nurse greeting someone with a warm good morning. No raised voices, no sighs of annoyance, no footsteps avoiding me as though I were a shadow taking up space. It was astonishing how quickly peace could feel foreign, and then, slowly, like it belonged to me. I dressed and made my way to the dining room. The staff greeted me by name, not because they had memorized a chart, but because they had listened when I introduced myself the day before. Good morning, Mrs. Henley, one of them said, pouring hot water into a teapot. Did you sleep well? Yes, I answered honestly. Very well. I sat near the window. A woman about my age was reading a newspaper. Another was knitting a blanket the color of autumn leaves. They nodded politely, leaving space for conversation but not forcing it. I appreciated that. There is a kind of respect in allowing someone to arrive at their own rhythm. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed. Daniel. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, I felt none, but because I wanted to finish my tea in silence. He left a voicemail. Then another. A few minutes later, Carol texted something long again. I did not open it. People often mistake access for importance. I was learning the difference. Later that morning, I stepped outside into the courtyard garden. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of rosemary from a planter near the door. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, until I reached a wooden bench beneath a small tree that hadn't yet decided if it wanted to be green or golden. I sat there, letting the breeze brush my cheek. That's when I saw her, Lily, coming through the gate, carrying a paper bag. "There you are," she said, smiling. "I brought muffins, the good kind from the bakery downtown." I felt warmth spread through my chest. "You didn't need to do that." "I know," she said, sitting beside me, "but I wanted to." We ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that holds comfort, not tension. Then she pulled something from her bag. A small, potted succulent, planted in a ceramic pot shaped like a teacup. "For your window," she said. It looked a little empty. I traced the rim of the pot with my finger. "It's perfect." She studied me quietly. "You look lighter." "I feel lighter," I said. I didn't realize how heavy things had become. Lily nodded. "Mom called me last night." "Did she?" "She said you ran away." Lily rolled her eyes. "As if you're 16. I laughed softly, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. I walked out the front door, quite slowly. "I told Mom that," she said, "and she said it was all very dramatic." That's her favorite word. "She's upset," Lily added. I sighed. "She's upset because I made a choice she didn't approve of. That's not the same as being harmed." "Daniel's upset too," she said gently. "I know. You should hear what he said." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I don't need their explanations right now." Lily looked down at her hands. "Do you want to talk to them eventually?" "Eventually," I said. "Not today. And not to justify anything. Just to talk?" "Yes. When they're ready to see me. Not a responsibility. Not a disruption. Me." Lily exhaled with a kind of relief that reached her shoulders. "Good." We spent the next hour walking the garden slowly. I showed her the roses outside my window, already budding. She pointed out a squirrel with a crooked tail. We laughed quietly, the way people do when the world finally gives them space to breathe. Before she left, she hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I closed my eyes, feeling her warmth. "You saved me, you know." She pulled back. "No. I just reminded you that you're still allowed to choose yourself." When she drove away, I stayed on the bench a few minutes longer, letting the breeze carry away whatever sorrow still clung to me. That afternoon, I unpacked the rest of my things: my husband's photo, my books, the knitted shawl I'd made last winter. I placed the succulent on the windowsill where the sun hit it gently. For the first time in a long while, the space I lived in felt like mine. Near evening, I allowed myself to listen to Daniel's voicemails. His first message was brimming with panic, the second with guilt, the third with a tired, aching confusion. "Mom, please call me. I need to know you're okay. I don't understand why you left. Carol is upset. Mila is upset. I'm upset. Please, just tell me you're all right. I listened to them all without anger. Hurt can echo even when it's unintentional. I didn't call him back. Not yet. Not until I could speak without shrinking or defending or softening my edges to make others comfortable. Tonight was for me, for quiet, for fresh sheets and a window and a bed that didn't groan under weight it didn't welcome. Tomorrow, I would answer him. But tonight, I rested. And rest, when you've earned it the hard way, feels like reclaiming a part of yourself you thought was lost. On the 15th day, I finally understood something I should have learned years ago. Leaving is not the opposite of loving. Sometimes it is the only way to love yourself enough to stay alive inside your own life. The morning light at Evergreen House was softer than the harsh strip of hallway light I'd grown used to. It came through the window like a gentle hand resting on my shoulder, steady and warm. I lay there for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the building, the muted laughter from the dining room down the hall, the distant sound of a cart rolling past. Every sound here held purpose. None of it felt like an apology for my existence. I dressed slowly, pain present but manageable, and made my way to the garden. My succulent sat on the windowsill, reaching toward the sun in a way I understood more than anyone here could know. Growth is simple once the shade is gone. Outside, the roses were opening, bright and full, like they had been waiting for me. I sat on the bench, letting the quiet settle around me, and for the first time since leaving Daniel's house, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. Not bitterness, not triumph, just truth. People often think aging means becoming smaller, shrinking in your opinions, your needs, your presence. But it isn't aging that does that. It's the way the world treats you when you start moving more slowly, when your hands don't grip as tightly, when your memory falters just enough for others to take advantage of the space. I had shrunk myself for years without noticing. I had softened my voice, lowered my expectations, made myself light enough for others to carry without strain. But the moment I walked out of that house, leaning on my cane, Lily at my side, I realized something. I was only ever small because they needed me to be. In the garden, the air smelled of earth and new leaves. A young nurse walked past, greeting me with a respectful nod before continuing on, not hovering, not patronizing, just seeing me. A person, a woman, a whole life behind her. I took a slow breath. I had been waiting to call Daniel back, waiting for the ache in my chest to settle. Today, it finally had. I took out my phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Mom?" "I'm all right," I said softly. A sharp exhale, the sound of a held breath released. "I've been so worried. I didn't know if I'm safe." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" "I did tell you," I said. "You just didn't want to hear it." Another silence. "I miss you," he whispered. "I miss you too," I said. "But I couldn't stay there. Not the way things were." "I know," he said. His voice cracked. "I didn't realize how much pressure Carol was putting on you. I should have done better." "You should have listened," I corrected gently. "I know," he repeated. He didn't make excuses. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard in years. "I'm glad you're safe," he said finally. "But do you think you'll ever come back?" "Not to that house," I said. "But you can come to me when you're ready." when it's about seeing me, not managing me. He swallowed. I'd like that. We spoke a little longer, lightly, carefully, like two people relearning each other after a long winter. When we said goodbye, neither of us was angry. It was a beginning, a small one, but beginnings rarely start loud. When I put the phone down, the garden felt brighter. The roses seemed to lean a little closer. Lily came by in the afternoon with another plant. A trailing ivy, she said, would grow well along the window frame. She placed it gently, then sat with me on the bench. "You look peaceful," she said. "I feel peaceful," I replied. "You did the right thing, Grandma." "Yes," I said. "I did." We sat in silence for a while, the sun warm on our faces. Then Lily squeezed my hand. "What now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "I live, quietly, honestly, on my own terms." And that was the truth. I didn't need a grand victory. I didn't need a confrontation or a reckoning. The quiet reclaiming of my dignity was enough. More than enough. Before she left, Lily hugged me tight. "I love you." "I love you too," I said. When she drove away, I remained in the garden a while longer, letting the late afternoon light settle around me like a soft shawl. Then I went inside to my room, where my bed waited, uncramped and mine, and the air carried no scent of resentment. As I closed the door behind me, I spoke a truth aloud, one that had lived in my chest for far too long. No one gets to decide who I am. Not anymore. And to whoever needs to hear it, whether a woman my age or someone much younger, feeling themselves shrink, you are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to walk away. And you are allowed to take up space in your own life. If this story touched you, share it, speak about it, or leave a word for the ones who might need it too. Sometimes a single voice is enough to remind another woman she is not alone.